cattle breeding in Ireland is in a really good place. You know, Irish farmers and the Irish cattle breeding industry has made tremendous strides, and IHFA as the pedigree society is a very important part of that. I think our role is going to grow in there because I think there's where the industry is at the moment. I think there's a really strong appreciation for a good black and white cow, and that's a cow to suit all systems as well.
Hello, I'm Stuart Childs and you're welcome to the Dairy Edge, the Teagasc Dairy podcast. We're bringing you the latest information, insights and opinion to improve dairy farm performance. Today, as part of Teagasc Breeding Week 2023, I'm speaking with Laurence Feeney, CEO of the IHFA, about how the association's members are planning to meet the challenges of the future through their breeding, and also the advice that they are dispensing to their members. But first, I started by asking Laurence to tell us a bit about himself to give people who may not know much about him a bit of background.
I grew up on a dairy farm in County Meath. I've been working with progressive genetics for about 20 years before taking up the role with IHFA. So I've been dealing with dairy cows and agriculture and cattle breeding for a long number of years. I suppose if we go back to early career and growing up on a dairy farm in a kind of a liquid milk farm in Meath, I was very involved in the breeding side of things from the very start. And I don't know if you remember, or maybe some of the listeners will remember, AI bull called Beliver Mango. And there was also a bull called Beliver Olympic Gold that were lucky enough to make it into AI. They were some of my early side projects. But when I got involved with working with progressive genetics full time, I didn't have so much time on the farm anymore, but was really heavily involved in the dairy breeding programs with progressive genetics, and I was marketing manager for a time there. So, you know, very heavily involved in, I suppose, the early days of EBI, the expansion of the Irish dairy breeding program as well, and we would have seen a huge changes there over the years, with EBI becoming more and more important and the Irish genetics coming more and more important as well, and those kind of like Irish bred bulls coming to the top of the list, which was, you know, great to see. And I suppose that's the IHFA influence coming through to some degree in the dairy breeding programs, because they're all coming from Irish herds. And then I suppose the most recent thing, probably in terms of my progressive genetics time, was the growth of sex semen, and I suppose that's you know, having a huge influence on the dairy market now. But look, I was there for about 20 years. I got the opportunity to join IHFA when the previous CEO Charlie Gallagher retired, and look, I couldn't refuse an opportunity like that. And yeah, I think people in the northern part of the country will probably know me well. People in the southern part of the country, I probably wouldn't have had as much dealings with, but I'm getting to know them.
Very good. And I suppose just in terms of the role as it is currently, we'll say, or since you've taken it up, what's your experience of it so far? I presume you're enjoying it, obviously, as you said, getting to know more people further south, etc.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it tremendously so far. Like, I think, and I suppose one of the reasons I was enthusiastic for taking the role, Stuart, is I think cattle breeding in Ireland is in a really good place, and it's an opportunity for me, I suppose, to be very deeply involved in it on a national level. Like I say, I think, you know, Irish farmers and the Irish cattle breeding industry has made tremendous strides. And IHFA as the pedigree society is a very important part of that. I think our role is going to grow in there because I think there's where the industry is at the moment. I think there's a really strong appreciation for a good black and white cow, and that's a cow to suit all systems as well. So it's a pure Friesian cow for some systems. It's a high EBI grazing cow for other systems, and it's a high production cow for other systems. And IHFA represents a full spectrum of those systems and of those genetics, and it's got genetics to fit all the various systems and to expand all the various systems as well. So, you know, I think it's a really good time to be involved in the black and white breed in Ireland. And I suppose one of the exciting things I've seen since I came in is as well as being a very important part of the breeding infrastructure in Ireland, IHFA is also a really important part of the promotion of the dairy industry in Ireland. Because we're so public facing in terms of shows and events and things like that, we get to interact with the public and get to represent the dairy industry in a really nice way through the cows, through good breeding and getting cows out in front of the public and in front of policymakers and stuff like that, and really getting, to show what Irish farmers do. So, it's certainly an interesting place to work at the moment.
So you mentioned the shows there, and as you said, people probably, the IHFA is synonymous with the show type cow maybe, and maybe in general there might be a perception that IHFA is very much the show cow, whereas you're representing far greater spread of people than that. And what we'll say the direction for breeding within the organisation in your mind? What direction should your members? I think, as again, like we were discussing in advance, like there's people that have show cows and they're show cows for the shows, and then they have their commercial herds in the background, and they actually run very different systems maybe. So they have the very high merit, high production type cow for the show, and then they have their good performing commercial herd in the background. So I suppose that the title of today's interview is like, how are pedigree herds preparing for the future challenges? Are they any different to the challenges that exist for the ordinary everyday commercial farmer, we'll call it, and even the crossbred farmer maybe? Like,
yeah, and to be honest, Stuart, I think because our members are a very broad spectrum of dairy farms in Ireland, the concerns of our members are almost exactly the same as for every other farmer in the country. Yes, we have some high production herds and some show herds, but they're a small enough part of our membership. I think the shows are very important from a public relations point of view, and you know what I mean. It gets black and white cows out and in the public view, but all our members are commercial dairy farmers first and foremost, and their milk check is the primary income. So I think where most people are at the moment, and from talking to our members and from the data that we have through ICBF, an awful lot of our herds, Stuart, are reaping the rewards, let's say, of the better breeding for fertility over the last number of years. So fertility is probably not the main concern in most herds. It's still going to be extremely important. But there are other drivers now. And I suppose when we look at the changing challenges, I suppose, that some of the environmental concerns and regulations are bringing, we have to strive for really efficient cows for the system that the farm is running. I'm not talking to very many people who are talking about radically changing their system. For the most part, people are running systems to suit their farms. Yes, they're coming under pressure in terms of stocking rates because of nitrates and things like that. Mostly that's coming down to people wanting to make sure the cows they have in their farmers are efficient as possible, right? And there's some opportunities there. And I think particularly because we're in such a good place as regards cow fertility in general, cows are more easily lasting longer in herds. But there's other things now starting to become much more of a challenge. Things like mastitis and lameness in particular. So health traits are becoming more important, and we're seeing much more people focusing on the health traits, much more people focusing on lameness, more emphasis in some quarters on the conformation scores of cows, again, particularly around those udders and feet and legs, to try and get these cows to last as long as possible. And what that's going to do then is going to allow us to reduce our replacement rate. And reduced replacement rate means we can have fewer non-productive animals on a farm, carry fewer replacements, so we can afford to have more productive animals, more milking cows, less dry stock, essentially. And that's where most people are trying to get to. And there are, like, we have the carbon index in now, and that's a very important part of the infrastructure from a national point of view. We will have methane breeding values, I'm sure, in the coming years. That will change the profile somewhat, but really the focus is efficiency and making sure you're breeding from the best cows possible. And sex semen gives us an opportunity to do that. Our data analyst, Patrick Kelly, has done a nice feature for our spring journal, which will be online now in the next couple of days, about using the milk records to select your cows better for breeding replacement from. You know what I mean? I think where we are now with fertility and sex semen, we can afford to be really picky about the cows we breed from. And that'll enable us to accelerate things even better than we have been.
Yeah, so I suppose you mentioned the efficiency, I suppose, and if I look at it where in my Teagasc cat here, like we push hard in terms of kilos of milk solids and so forth, but driven by the percentages. So is that the angle that you're talking about there? So you've some very high production herds, obviously, as members. And when I say high production now, I mean high solids production there, like. But that solids is coming from maybe moderate percentages and strong litres. So I suppose the angle that I'm getting at here with this question is there scope for higher percentages to come from the breed? And the other question then probably comes back to your point about the environmental questions there earlier. The banding is obviously impacting on some and maybe disproportionately on some of your members relative to the national herd potentially. So have you any thoughts on that side of things in terms of trying to increase the efficiency, as you said, but that the efficiency is coming through just more milk solids coming out of maybe the same volume or even maybe a lesser volume of milk? What's your thoughts in that area?
Yeah, like I think, Stuart, like some of our members are quite focused on high volumes, high litres per cows, and usually that's related to the type of farm they're running. You know what I mean? Smaller milk.
County Meath obviously would be associated with that winter milk background, or liquid milk type background, yeah.
Smaller milking platforms, liquid milk systems, things like that, right? But the vast majority of people in my view anyway, have a system to suit their farm, and they don't really want to go tweaking the system too much. So it's definitely about moderate gains for milk litres, if any, and especially when you're banded, you know, you may not want to increase your milk litres at all, but increase the solids. And we've seen plenty of pure black and white herds, you know, well over 4% fat, 3.7, 3.8% protein, from a black and white cow that's, you know, doing a really good job and producing a good quality calf, and you know what I mean, not causing any problems when you've got that system. And I think it's just about getting more people want to be in at that type of level, and the people who are already at that type of level want to maintain it and, like I say, tweak it. Fertility is still going to be the biggest driver, and as well as that, then herd maturity is going to be a huge driver of production as well. So, and I think people have seen that over the last number of years, and they have a bigger appreciation of that if you have a fertile, mature cow, she's going to produce loads of milk solids with high percentages. So that's definitely the direction of travel. There'll be one or two herds changing their system or tweaking their system, but I don't think there's too many. The system is, in fairness to you guys in Teagasc, you have the system fairly well figured out, right? And it's a simple system, and most people like that simple system. So, I don't think the system is going to change very much.
The direction of travel for farms is to kind of stick to the status quo rather than go any knee-jerk reaction, and that would be like what we'd be strongly recommending to people, is that you really need to just look at where you're at really, and decide that they're going to try and improve the things that you need to improve, and not go chasing volume. I suppose is probably a big concern to people, because that is in essence that is a system change, isn't it?
Well, it is. And like when you see when you see what herds are doing at the moment, and you pick up an AI catalog at the moment, and you see a high EBI bull with a very moderate amount of milk with plus 0.20% protein or something like that, daughters capable of milking 3.8% protein very easily, or across a broad average. That genetics is there, so why would we not use it? You don't necessarily need the high volume to get the high output, and those cows are generally pretty easily managed without big changes to the system, and without higher costs as well, because I suppose it's all very well changing systems and getting higher output, but that higher output frequently comes with higher costs. So we have to be very mindful of that too. So we have to be, our systems have to be robust, and sustainable for the long term.
Okay, so you mentioned the challenges, I suppose, from an environmental point of view, and methane and the nitrates obviously are the two big ones. Is there anything that you're doing, we'll say maybe in the background, that in terms of trying to mitigate against those in particular for the association? And like, are there any other areas that you foresee, either positive or negative, we'll say, for the association into the future as well?
Well, look, I suppose there's a lot of research still to come, and there's a lot more understanding in terms of methane. I think we're still going to be in the realm of wanting an efficient cow who produces high kilos of solids. And, that's kind of, I don't see anything in any of the research so far that moves very far away from that. So I think it's going to be about picking within that. I suppose the one area that's kind of very much, an area of, an opportunity and an area of concern at the moment is the beef side of it. Now, I suppose our members, probably like a lot of dairy farmers over the last number of years, probably haven't thought very deeply about the beef side of the equation. But I suppose with some of the potential risks in the calf market, we have to make sure we're delivering a good product to the calf buyers. And in general, our members have no big problems moving on bull calves, either Friesian bull calves or beef cross bull calves. But, one of the messages we're putting out to our members at the moment is to look at the quality of the beef bull you have on the farm, and look at the quality of the beef AI bull you're using as well, and make sure you're getting that to a level where you're producing a really attractive calf. Because, we want people coming to our farms to buy beef cross calves and Friesian bull calves, and make sure we're at the top end of that market going forward. And I suppose that probably goes for every farmer in the country at the moment. But I think we need to, manage a risk there. If there is a risk coming down the road to us in a couple of years' time, now is the time to start thinking about it.
So your angle there basically is that obviously dairy bred animals, whatever breed they are going to be dairy bred animals, and they're going to have a low enough beef merit no matter what way you go about it. Like, so you're saying at the moment maybe you might have a scenario where your members or the dairy farmer population in Ireland in general are, we'll say, using a cow that's, we'll call for argument's sake, number one, or is the number one, and we're adding number two in the form of our beef bull onto it, and we're getting three. But what you're suggesting to your members now is that you still have your number one, but you now go down the route of adding number three to get to four instead, so that you have a better overall product. Or maybe if you had a relatively maybe the British Friesian or the Friesian people within the association are more 2 + 2 = 4, and you're saying to go 2 + 3 = 5 type scenario to just increase that beef quality. Like, and how important is that then, Laurence, from the point of view of the whole circular economy? I mean, like, some people possibly have the attitude of like, sure, what's in it for me to do that? Like, it's critical, really, is it?
Well, look, I mean, milk check still pays the bills, Stuart, and the beef part of it is never going to be a huge part of a farmer's income. Some kind of pure Friesian orientated herd have always seen a good demand for Friesian bull calves and really appreciate that market. I think it's about the value of the calf to some extent, but it's also, I suppose, about making sure we have a good, steady outlet for those calves, and we have build up those relationships with the calf buyers and have a steady customer base for those calves. And that makes life easy, like, especially, we're middle of March now, calf sheds are full. People love to see trailers coming into the yard looking for calves, you know what I mean? And it's not always about getting a huge price for your calf, but having a sustainable market at a fair price at the very least, So I think that's the way I would see it, is, I suppose, a little bit of our responsibility in terms of keeping cows is to make sure we have a market for those calves. And I suppose we'll try and do it in such a way as we're getting the most value out of it, and we're making our lives on our farms as easy as possible too.
Okay, very good. And I suppose we better wrap it up in terms of a summary. So we started out, as I said at the start, we were discussing how pedigree breeders are preparing for future challenges, but ultimately we've ended up having a conversation about how every dairy farmer in Ireland should be planning for future challenges. So your top 3 things for your association members and farmers in general to focus on for the breeding season that's coming towards us now?
Yeah, well, look, it's funny the way our conversation has gone, Stuart. And I suppose, look, realistically, our members are commercial dairy farmers. I suppose they're probably the ones who are extremely enthusiastic about their cows. And I suppose you could probably describe every dairy farmer in the country as being like that anyway. So, listen, I think it's the big concerns at the moment are breeding for longevity, because that affects every single farm. And making sure we're making the maximum genetic gain by getting the best cows for our herd. That's going to mitigate some of the climate challenges. And if we pay attention to our beef calf and our bull calf to make sure we have good solid markets for those, I think those are the big things to try and deal with the challenges that we have at the moment. Okay,
very good. So thanks, Laurence, for joining me today, and trying to promote Breeding Week with me as much as possible across the industry. So I'll talk to you again, and thanks again for coming on.
Thank you very much, Stuart.
That's all for this week's episode of the Dairy Age podcast, and my thanks to Laurence Feeney for joining me on this week's show. Don't forget to rate, review and subscribe to the podcast. You can listen on Apple and Google Podcasts as well as Spotify, and for more information go to the Teagasc website at teagasc.ie. I'm Stuart Childs, and join me next time for your Dairy Age.